Chapter 1. Someone Else's Dream. He was at the heart of the abyss, a realm where no light dared to enter. Everything was pitch black, but the darkness went far beyond the mere absence of light. It was a darkness that had a presence of its own, a darkness that felt familiar to him, a darkness that carried a name. But he had forgotten what that name was, or maybe he had never known it at all. He wasn't able to say for sure. Everything felt hazy in this realm. His eyes were heavy. His body felt numb. He was getting swallowed by the darkness that slowly cradled him into submission with a silent lullaby. He closed his eyes and let himself get swept away by the unseen current of the abyss. Somehow, with his eyes shut, everything seemed to be brighter than before. 3 small lights appeared in front of him, scorching through the darkness with licks of pristine white flames. In that flickering light, he was starting to see after-images of things that once shone brightly on its own. He thought he was reliving his memories, but inexplicably in a very vicarious way, as if they were mere stories told to him by someone else. He was hearing whispers and echoes, voices he knew to be foreign, but still sounded like his own. He had entered a realm where lifetimes seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, a realm where he thought to feel everything at once, and yet nothing at all. He couldn't move. His body was but an abandoned vessel, drifting on the waves of an open sea without a captain at the helm, guided only by the force of the current. It felt right, however, as if everything was the way it was supposed to be. The 3 flames were growing bigger and brighter. They kept growing until everything was engulfed in a dazzling radiance. The blinding brightness made him feel naked and exposed. It felt as if he were being watched from afar. The whispers he heard no longer bore any familiarity. All of the sudden, he had become a visitor in the domain of a stranger, a traveller in a foreign land, a mere side character in someone else's dream. The whispers intensified. He thought he heard someone call out his name, but the whispers were hidden within a chaotic whirlwind of voices. And somewhere in the midst of that vocal storm, he even thought to hear a distant sound that reminded him of his own voice, wailing in agony. His unease quickly rose to a panic when the whispers swirling around him escalated to angry shouts. He heard no words that he could understand, but felt that the intention was menacing, malevolent even. The voices kept getting louder until they crashed into him like a tidal wave, drowning out even the sound of his own thoughts. It lasted for what felt like an eternity, but when the ruckus finally subsided, all that remained was the harrowing sound of desiccated leaves skittering across his mind.
"Open your eyes,"
he heard an unfamiliar voice say to him. The voice was cold and sharp, like the whistles of a winter storm.
"Open your eyes,"
he heard again after a moment of silence. He didn't trust the unknown source and felt a strong urge to resist the request. But then a second voice came through.
"Open your eyes,"
it also said. Unlike the first voice, this one was warm and tender like a mild summer breeze. He finally obeyed the command and found the courage to open his eyes. The emptiness was no more, neither black nor white. Instead, he was in a place he didn't necessarily recognize, but somehow still made him feel as if he had returned home. He was somewhere deep within a forest, surrounded by tall birch trees that reached for the dark night sky. The trees had bark as white as the teeth of a shark, and eyes that seemed to observe him like watchful sentinels of a well-guarded fortress. The movement in his body was still absent, but he could sense himself being driven forward by an unseen force, magnetized toward a place that immediately invoked a horrible sensation of absolute terror. The eyes on the birch trees were following him as he floated past them. The friction of rustling leaves underneath his hovering feet sounded like the chants of a crowded arena cheering him on to reach for the finish line. But he was just a passenger, riding along the stream of an unseen force. He could only follow the course that was set for him, and as he was carried outside the forest, all sounds cut off to a deafening silence. All of the sudden, he was staring at a wide open space. High up in the nocturnal sky, the crescent moon cast down a slender beam of light, illuminating what looked like a platform of an amphitheatre, and he was given a front row seat to an exclusive stage play. Ahead of him, He saw a frozen oval-shaped lake light up in a brilliant silvery shimmer. A large, circular hole at the center made the lake look like an enormous eye that was staring at the heavens above. He followed the frozen gaze to the sky and felt strangely energized by the sight, as if he was given the strength to overcome any adversity in life. He felt euphoric, and for a brief moment, even thought to have become a god. Snowflakes began dwindling down from the celestial ceiling, gracefully dancing their way toward the icy carpet in a majestic ballet. It was the most wondrous spectacle he had ever witnessed. He could almost hear the orchestra guiding the dancers to the stage. He felt that he was smiling as he watched the ethereal performance in awe. But when he returned his eyes to the frozen lake, a suffocating feeling of dread immediately latched onto his entire being. Out of nowhere, two silhouettes had appeared at the center of the stage. They were looking down the black hole at their feet. The silhouettes had identical shapes like two separate shadows that were cast by the very same person. They were holding hands. He felt immensely distressed, as if seeing something he wasn't supposed to see, as if having stumbled upon an event of great secrecy. All he could think about was how he needed to escape that place as fast as he could, but his body refused to obey his command. He drifted toward the silhouettes against his will, and as he got closer to them, their appearances started to reveal themselves. They were twins. One of the figures was a boy with long, flowing hair, as silver as the glow on the moon that illuminated the sky. His face was flawless and smooth, like a perfectly chiseled statue that was made by a master sculptor. His skin was like porcelain, as white as the snowflakes landing on it. He had blue eyes, but it wasn't any specific type of blue. It was a blue that held every imaginable shade of the color. The other figure was a girl. She looked exactly like the boy, but felt completely different to the observing visitor. Unlike the cold and distant energy he felt from the boy, she radiated warmth and kindness. Her presence seemed to alleviate some of his anxiety, if only for a short period of time. His heart skipped a beat when the boy suddenly took notice of him. The frigid blues of the boy's eyes froze him to his very core and sent sharp shivers down his spine. For a moment, it felt as if he were looking at himself in a mirror, but couldn't quite recognize the reflection that was cast back at him. The boy opened his mouth to say something, but all the visitor could hear was a chaotic rustling of leaves, scraping across the forest floor like rusty nails, scratching a metal plate. The visitor felt his panic rising. His mind was completely buried under the crushing weight of dread, as if at any given moment the entire world would collapse. But then the girl raised her eyes to look at him as well, and all of the sudden his fear seemed like a thing of the past. He smiled at her, or at the very least thought that he did, and she smiled back. Then, without any warning, she let herself fall into the black hole. The panic instantly returned, as if he himself were sinking into the bottomless darkness underneath the frozen lake. He wanted to scream and dive into the ice hole himself to pull her back to the surface. He would have done anything just to make the anguish stop, but failed to convince his body to cooperate. He could only helplessly stare and watch the macabre scene unfold as he felt a claw squeezing his heart in an ice-cold grip. The boy stared into the dark abyss without any discernible emotions. He then raised his head to face the intruding visitor. He smiled, just as the visitor and the girl had smiled. But the smile was hollow and harboured no warmth. It was a mere afterglow on a horizon where the sun had already set. The visitor was terrified and had never felt so fearful for his life before. He was staring into the eyes that seemed to hold so much contempt for him, as if he were the one to blame for the girl's death. The boy moved closer to the visitor, but the closer he came, the more he began to fall apart. Like centuries of ebb and flow that washed away all features of a rugged coastline, the boy slowly eroded to a featureless apparition until he was no more than a translucent spectre. And as he hovered above the visitor, he stretched out his hand as if extending an invitation to join him. The visitor stood paralyzed. He didn't want to accept the spectre's hand, but he was no more than a puppet that could only move on the whim of his unseen puppeteer. He felt his arm raising on its own, and just when he could almost feel the touch of the spectre, everything turned to black again. The frozen lake, the crescent moon, the dwindling snowflakes, the forest of birch trees, the spectre. They all vanished when a shadow wrapped around him in what felt like a loving embrace. The darkness had returned, and it spoke to him.
Cato, wake up.